Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 14 kicks off in just a couple of days, and we are going to go through and break down position by position, question by question, strategy by strategy question, bankroll management, game theory, anything that my chat here on Twitch wants to ask. I'm going to do my best to answer it to the best of my ability. Now, I am not saying that I have a crystal ball. I'm not here to give you and say, these are the best plays on the weekend and you have to do this. And if this guy doesn't bust, then I'm going to eat a hat on stream. That's not how this goes. I've been doing research all week, just like every week. I'm going to give you, based on that process-based, that research-based decision-making that I tend to go with, what I feel are the better decisions to make and how we're going to look at different things or in different price ranges or anything. So they get to ask me questions for about an hour every Friday, and then we publish it to YouTube. So thank you guys for joining this show once again. If you would do me a favor and drop a like on this video, I would be greatly appreciative. Be sure that you subscribe to the channel and ring that notifications bell, because I come out with a lot of content throughout the week and I don't want you to miss any of it. And I especially don't want you to miss the Anti-Tinkercast, which is 45 minutes right before lock on twitch.tv. There's a link down below in the description that you can come follow me on Twitch, and I go live 45 minutes before lock all the way up until lock, taking questions from subs on twitch.tv. Would love to get to know you, so come over there. Let's get the chat in here and let's see what they have to ask me today. Jay will practice today. You play DAVANTE Adams again this week. I think that DAVANTE Adams is fine in tournaments this week. I don't know that he's a cash game play. They definitely have priced him up. I think that there's guys that are cheaper. We said that this was a massive misprice last week, and it sure was. It's 7K. With him being back, 69, 67, 7K, especially against the Giants, right? Coming off of a game against San Francisco. We've talked about this a few times in the past. You look at players who have seen diminishing returns, right, for a few weeks for one reason or another. They played tough defenses. They've had tough matchups. The Chargers with Hayward is a tough matchup. Carolina with Bradbury is a tough matchup, but he still scored 20 DraftKings points, 21.8 to be exact. San Francisco, tough matchup for basically everybody on the field, still had 12 targets, caught 7 of them, 19.3 DraftKings points against that defense, and still stayed at a low price when he faced New York, which is a terrible pass defense. Now he was more likely to have a high floor and a high ceiling game, and he got there with 24.4 points. Now he's been priced up to 8K against Washington, who struggled against perimeter wide receivers all season long. So I think he's still a good play. I don't know that we can get there with the value that we have, but that may be changing by the time we get all the Friday practice reports and injuries and inactives come out 90 minutes before lock every Sunday. So we'll know more as the week goes on. Mubot's drunk again? Mubot's Mubot. Leave Mubot alone. Mubot's nice. Too dangerous to fade the chalky Jets? Well, we don't. Okay, here's an injury that we do have to talk about, or an injury designation that we have to talk about. So, pardon me, guys. My kids are sick. My wife's been sick. So, like, I feel like I'm having a little bit of a head cold thing going on this morning. I don't feel sick, but like, feel like my head's a little stuffy, my sinuses are a little stuffy, and my throat's a little scratchy. So I'm gonna try my best to make it through this. I'm active. I'm not active. You know, I'm out here trying to do what I can and give my best for the team, give 110%, and God willing, everything will work out okay. Le'Veon Bell's been the highest volume running back on the Jets that we've seen for the last bunch of weeks. He hasn't been very efficient, but he's piled up numbers and piled up stats and gotten the bulk of the carries inside the 5-yard line, scored a few touchdowns. And been very used in the passing game, giving a really good floor. Now they have a dream matchup against Miami, and he's questionable. He's not practicing again today on Friday when we're recording this, and that could open up some very massive value on this slate. One of the two spots that very big value could open up. So Jets, if Bell is out, now we have Montgomery and Powell. I'm going to assume from where we're sitting right now that Bilal Powell is going to be the lead guy in the absence of Le'Veon Bell. And we don't know that he's out yet. And if we get that designation, we'll deal with it when it comes. So going over to Daily Roto really quick and looking at what they believe is going to happen as it sits right now. Le'Veon Bell, they have projected at 52.5% of the market share of rushes. They have him projected for about 51% of the running back touchdowns or the rushing touchdowns and 12% of the targets. If he goes away, NFL is very much a a next man up sort of sport, next man up sort of situation, especially for fantasy. Talent matters way less than opportunity when it comes to output in daily fantasy. So now, if Le'Veon Bell seeds this performance and you project Bilal Powell with that amount of rushing usage, that amount of usage in the pass game, and it's probably not going to be 100% him, but let's say he gets the majority, the lion's share of Le'Veon Bell's work on top of what he already is projected for and gets already, and then Ty Montgomery eats up a little bit of the rest, you have a player at 3,500 against a really terrible defense that's allowing so many red zone trips, so many points per drive. More points per drive is Miami allowing than the winless 2008 Detroit Lions. The Lions that year allowed 2.61, I believe, points per drive, real life points per drive. And this Miami team is allowing 2.62. So while their record's a little bit better than that winless team with the Lions in 2008, their defense has been way better for fantasy, or not way, but it's been even better for fantasy than that team was. So Bilal Powell is possibly a very good value play in the case that Le'Veon Bell is out. We've talked all week about Sam Darnold, Crowder, possibly Anderson. So there's a lot of plays in that game, and there might be even more. And the other injury that we do have to monitor, and it looks like he might play, which kind of jacks things around a little bit, to be very honest with you, is Dalvin Cook. So Dalvin Cook's been dealing with this injury since last week. He insists that he's going to play this weekend, and if he does, then I don't know that he's going to get the normal Dalvin Cook usage that he usually gets, right? These 22 to 30 touches in a game against Detroit, game where they're heavily favored and at home. If Dalvin Cook is completely healthy, then I'm all in on Dalvin Cook at 9,500. But if he's not completely healthy, I think there's a lot of paths to failure at 9,500. Not just for Dalvin Cook, but priced specifically for Dalvin Cook based on that, you know, where he's sitting at. So like if he has like 80 yards rushing on 15 carries and catches 3 balls and scores 1 touchdown, that's a terrible day at 9,500 that you really don't want to buy into. And let's say that somebody like Alex Madison, in the case that Cook is active, gets more usage this week than he did last week when Cook left that game, although he did look very good. Let's say he gets 12 touches in this game instead of the 8 that he got last week. Maybe he scores a touchdown. He's got a floor of like, I don't know, 3 or 4 points and a ceiling of maybe 14 or 15 if Cook is active. If Cook misses this game, and it's not up to Cook, it's up to the team. They can just say, you're not playing because we're going to protect our asset for the playoffs. We don't need you this week, and we need you fully healthy for the weeks to come, because those are more important with us sitting at 8-4. That Madison becomes another amazing value play on this slate in the case that Cook is inactive for this game, and we'll know both of those guys before lineups lock on Sunday. Your Le'Veon Butterbell just arrived. Nice. OJ Howard versus Indianapolis defense that funnels to tight ends. Also Paris Campbell interest at 3,200. I don't like to answer exact 1v1s and 2v2s, but on Friday, that's something that we tend to save for the Anti-Tinkercast on Sunday when we have as much information as possible, right? Like I'm not trying to build my cash game lineup and finalize it on Friday, because right now it's like 10 a.m. on Friday when we're recording this show. So I'm not trying to like finish off a lineup. I think OJ Howard is somebody who you could sprinkle into tournament lineups. Paris Campbell, with him being back and everybody else being out, T.Y. Hilton not expected to play. We saw Pascal have himself a very good day last week in terms of volume and output, and Jack Doyle as well. So Paris Campbell is an electric young player who should see good volume if he's back this week, and is pretty cheap as well. Patrick Laird, thoughts for cash? I mean, let's look at running backs at that range. Let's do that instead, right? We already talked about Powell in the case that Le'Veon Bell is out, and I would prefer him to Laird. We just spoke about Madison. If Cook is out, I prefer him to Laird. Jamal Williams practicing on Friday, which usually means they're going to play in the game. I prefer him at 4,800 to Laird at the price that he's at as well. I think Laird is fine. Boom. But like, he's not somebody I'm like really looking to play. Falconator, thank you very much for the 4 months. As I appreciate all your content. Thanks for keeping showing up. I appreciate you guys clicking the channel day after day as I'm live on Twitch 6 days a week during NFL season. So I'm glad that you guys keep clicking. Raheem Mostert has been outstanding and has been the best back metrically for the San Francisco 49ers. And this could be this 19 carries and 21 touches that he saw against Baltimore could be a merit-based promotion for Mostert moving forward, but we don't know. So to me, it's at this point still a bit of a leap of faith in a road game against a tough front seven like New Orleans has. But you know that San Francisco is at least going to be a team that is very, very committed to the run. Z-Bits, you just said that Olsen has been officially ruled out. Yes, he has. I just saw that pop up on Twitter. Okay, so now we can talk about that. Okay? Now this is finally something that we can talk about. Because I hate giving, like, you know... I mean, I'll give you if-thens, because if-thens are important, right? The if-then statements that we talk about. But, like, it's tough to say... Because somebody asked, what do you think about Olsen this week? And I said, I don't know yet, because I don't have a call on him. Greg Olsen out now opens up Ian Thomas, who is a very athletic... good pass catching tight end who's got the ability to break long gains, which a lot of tight ends do not have. That opens up a little bit more red zone usage as well for somebody like Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore. Ian Thomas will also soak up some of that red zone usage. CMC is going to be him. I don't expect much change for this Panthers offense, even with the firing of Ron Rivera. But Ian Thomas now becomes very much of a salary release valve. If you want to kind of punt the position, knowing that if you get this 6.4 point day, if you couldn't afford the guys at the 4K range at tight end, right? And there are multiple players in that range. If you're not paying up at tight end for somebody like Kelsey or Hooper or Kittle or Waller or Henry, in that 4K range, you have Jack Doyle at 4,600, who I think is a very good play again because of the absence of targets that have left this offense with Ebron and Hilton. He saw 11 targets last week. I think anywhere from 6 to 11 targets is also in play this week. I know that that's a wide range, but that's about where his range is. So he's got a good floor and a possible ceiling with the amount of red zone usage that he gets. I know that people are going to want to click on Vance McDonald because they're playing Arizona. I think he is a little bit sketchier than either 300 more for Doyle or 300 less for Mike Gesicki. If Vance McDonald was 3,500, I'd be a lot more interested in him, but he's 4,300. He's been priced up based on the matchup. Gesicki's been very consistent with his volume, 7, 7, 6, 6, 6 each of the last 5 weeks with a quarterback that likes to throw it downfield, and the athleticism that Gesicki brings to the table at 4,000. But now Ian Thomas is going to soak up a lot of usage and becomes a great punt at 2,500. I'm not saying that he's not as plug and play. Okay? He's not as plug and play as Higbee was last week. That's just what it is. He's just not, right? But if you're expecting him to get, I don't know, 15% of the market share of the targets for Carolina, then all of a sudden he becomes a really, really good play at 2,500. Doyle's ownership percentage this week, it's going to be lower than it was last week, probably around... I think that tight end's going to be very split. I really do. Perry Follow says tight end position will be by committee this week with Manhurts, Thomas, and Alex Arma getting reps. We'll see. Because last week they just leaned on the one guy, but we'll see what they do. I do think that Curtis Samuel at 4,900 gets a little bit of a boost as well. And he's somebody that has been on my radar pretty much all week long and now a little bit more. Thoughts on Tom Brady this week? Tom Brady has not looked good. And the way that you beat Kansas City is twofold, right? So there's two ways that you beat Kansas City. New England kind of started this last year, and then we saw it again with Indy earlier this year. The way that you beat them is on the ground. You just ground and pound against Kansas City. They are not good at stopping the run. They allow a ton of yards to the running back. It also keeps their offense off the field, which is another way to do it. So it just makes sense that a team like the Patriots, who, you know, we talk about assumption of rational coaching, they actually are the team that has rational coaching and does what you expect them to do on a game-by-game basis. We would assume that they are going to try to run the ball. Now, if they get behind massively against Kansas City, if Kansas City gets out to a couple of touchdown lead, which may or may not happen, but in the possibility that the game flow does go that way, the way that you attack them through the air is in the slot, because their perimeter defense has been very good against wide receivers this year. One of the best in the league, top 5 in the league in terms of limiting fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers. But their worst, they're in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of allowing points to slot wide receivers. So that's where Julian Edelman spends his time. Julian Edelman with 10 plus targets in 7 straight weeks. Just absurd usage for that amount of time and that stretch. That's like Mike Thomas type usage, although he does not have the Michael Thomas type stats to go along with it so far. But this is a week where it's 7,100. Julian Edelman in a neutral game script, in a positive game script, or in a negative game script, whether meaning that if the Patriots are, if this is a close game, if the Patriots are winning by a lot, or if the Patriots are losing by a lot, Julian Edelman should be the guy who thrives in this game no matter what is happening. Now, if they're playing from ahead, and like we said, you want to establish the run, right, against Kansas City, because that's what they allow you to do. And we've seen the teams that have beaten them just pound them on the ground. Sony Michel seems to be the guy that they would do that with, and not James White. But there are many different types of game flows where James White, he's never not going to be involved, right? This was the rain game, so we can throw that one out. There's no way that James White is not involved in what New England does on a game-to-game basis. He's the one constant that they've had along with Edelman all season long. If you look at his game logs, he gets the 35 to 38% of the snaps. He is targeted when he's on the field, and he has the ability to have a big game, whether it's a positive or negative game script. He did carry the ball 14 times against Houston because he was the one that was on the field, because they were throwing all the time, because they were down for the majority of that game. He saw 8 catches on 11 targets and had that big game that we knew was going to come at some point during the season for him. Whether or not he follows it up with this week with that, I don't know. I can't 100% predict that he's going to have another big game or a 20-point game. But he should be able to fall in most situations between 11 and 13 or 11 and 14 DraftKings points for 5,500. That's not great, but if he finds his way into the end zone, he does exceed value at the salary. Michel home rushing attempts. Yeah, this is a game that looks like it's going to be a Sony Michel type game. If I had limited 10 lineups for GPP play, would I stay away from the Saints 49ers game? No, I wouldn't. That's just not, no. How am I leaning on value wide receivers Samuel versus Williams? Let me look. So you're talking like 4K to 5K? And you're talking about Gazelle as Williams? I mean, I think TYRELL against Tennessee is fine, but like realize that you're playing a spike type player. You're not playing a guy with a really high floor, doesn't get a ton of targets on any week. He is reliant on catching long passes and catching touchdowns for him to have a boom type week. He can't do it on volume alone, at least not with his role currently in this offense. Curtis Samuel can get there on volume alone and has the requisite volume in the red zone and between the 20s, or has shown that throughout the year. Now, DJ Moore has emerged as the star in this offense, but there is a place for Curtis Samuel. He is reliant on Kyle Allen's accuracy downfield. Him and DJ Moore were two of the players that have been missed the most on throws over 15 yards this season so far. So you have somebody like Curtis Samuel who can cash in if Kyle Allen does make an accurate throw downfield, and he's good in contested catch areas. He's good in the end zone. He is second on that team in end zone targets, behind only Greg Olsen, who is out this week. So as they get close, Kyle Allen does find him in the end zone or look for him in the end zone. Whether or not he finds him is a different situation. Do I prefer Samuel's possible additional targets or TD equity? I think his TD equity rises Samuel's, but I'm not sure that his targets rise. Because it's not like Olsen was getting like 25% of the targets or anything. So it's not like the vacated targets are going to be soaked up by the tight end in that offense. The wide receivers are going to run what they run. Mike Williams. Okay. Different Williams. Mike Williams at 4,500, going up against Jacksonville, who you want to attack with the run, but you can also, they're a little bit more vulnerable on the outside than they used to be. He's been steady, but not spectacular. He gets a lot of red zone looks. He gets a lot of end zone looks. He gets a lot of looks downfield, but he just hasn't cashed them in this year. And he was one guy that all offseason, everybody's saying, oh, he's going to have this massive year this year because he had 10 touchdowns last year. It's like, okay, touchdowns are fickle. And we say that constantly, right? Touchdowns are extremely fickle. And what you look for is volume in that area. And even guys that have volume in that area, meaning end zone targets and red zone targets, doesn't always translate towards touchdowns. Now, he should have more than 0. Right? He should have more than 0 touchdowns so far this year. I mean, Antonio Brown has more touchdowns this year than Mike Williams, but it doesn't have anywhere near the usage. So he can connect. And I think that he's a good floor play at 4,500 with the possibility for a ceiling, as we kind of saw him unlock last week with 19.7 DraftKings points without a touchdown. So I talk about guys reaching value on volume. Meaning, can they get there without scoring touchdowns? Because touchdowns are fickle and totally unpredictable. Mike Williams is somebody who can get there on volume alone. And on top of getting there on volume alone, he's somebody who does have some touchdown equity, brings that along with him. And if we can unlock that in a week, then all of a sudden we have a smash play at 4,500. I think that there's definite value plays at wide receiver in that 4K to 5K range. Deontay Johnson is one of them, going up against Arizona. He's seen similar volume to James Washington, but James Washington has made the splashier plays. He's the high contested catch guy. He had that great stiff arm for a touchdown against Cincinnati. So he's getting all the press, but Deontay Johnson coming in at a much lower price with similar volume. So should be a solid value play this week. John Ross, if you want to take a flyer on a player that's got big playability and was being used a ton earlier in the season, right? 20 targets in the first 2 games, 6 each in those next 2 games, and now he's back. We should at least be getting volume from a guy who does have the ability to get behind a defense. And then we mentioned Williams, Sammy Watkins, Marquise Brown. I'm not really thrilled about playing him this week, but in this offense, is the Ravens offense completely matchup independent at this point? Like, I don't know if defenses matter to the way that the Ravens run offense with all of their parts healthy and active and everything else. So like, Brown was limited to practice on Thursday. I haven't heard anything that says he's not going to play. If he does play in this game, he's 1 play away from being not a tournament winner, but he's 1 play away from a 60-yard touchdown, which on DraftKings is already 14 points. So he can get there in 1 catch. The problem is you're not going to get the usage that we saw from him in like weeks 2 and 3 against KC and Arizona, where he piled up 22 targets. This is what we're seeing. 2, 4, 4, 3. So he's completely a boomer bust guy. But as we saw in these weeks, 21 points for 5,800 and 18 points for 5,100. You're getting a much lower price because of the matchup, right? DraftKings prices teams up or players up based on really soft matchups. As I mentioned earlier with Vance McDonald, they price them down to try and entice you to take them against really tough defenses. And Buffalo is just that. And he's going to be drawing their number 1 corner, who is one of PFF's graded best cover corners in the league. How do I feel about Kyle Allen this week at 5,700? Meh. Like, I'm neither hot or cold on him. I play less quarterbacks, I think, than most people do. I kind of spread my quarterback usage, and I don't really go really heavy on one quarterback. And I know that's become kind of a trendy thing to do in tournaments, to say, okay, I'm going to play 1 or 2 quarterbacks over 100 or 150 lineups and stack everybody there. Like last week, if you had basically played, and again, this is hindsight, right? If you had stacked Wentz and Fitzmagic, and that was your 150 lineups, and put 2 players from their team and 1 player as a bring back, and then fill out the rest of the lineup with your core players, you probably would have won the Millionaire Maker. But like, what if you picked the wrong game too? You're winning nothing. So like, it's very much a boomer bust approach, and I don't like that sort of approach. I will take 5 to 15% of, 6 to 10 quarterbacks every single week, and I'll stack them and bring them back and all those sorts of things. But like, that's how I attack it. It's not necessarily right or wrong. It has worked for me over the years. And that's the way that I play the game. But I understand there is value towards saying, I'm going to take this one game, and if one of the two quarterbacks goes off and that game does shoot out, then all of a sudden I'm in contention with 75 to 150 lineups to win the Millionaire Maker, as opposed to somebody like me having 15 or 20 lineups that have a possibility of winning the Millionaire Maker if my game goes off. Getting to the next question, though, which somebody said Kamara at 7K is intriguing. It's the cheapest he's been this year. It is. And this is another situation where you've got a player being priced down because of a really tough matchup. Alvin Kamara has been basically an 8K running back, 8,100, 8,200, 7,400 against Tampa Bay. And we were playing him that week because he's not somebody that needs to pound the rock into the line to be effective, though he did actually do very well on the ground against Tampa Bay with a 5.8 yards per carry, 75 yards on 13 carries. Did not score a touchdown. He's only got 2 of those. I talked about it in terms of wide receivers, right? Where wide receivers would get red zone and end zone targets, especially end zone targets, because it just takes one catch to turn into 7 points. They're extremely valuable. Well, for running backs, carries inside the 5 are extremely valuable. And Alvin Kamara has not been the running back on New Orleans that has gotten those inside the 5 and inside the 10-yard line carries. So he has to score from a little bit deeper, but that doesn't mean that that can't happen. We spoke about this when Christian McCaffrey was playing San Francisco. I can't pay up for Christian McCaffrey against San Francisco because they're too good of a defense. Christian McCaffrey posted a really good day and really low ownership. I can't play running backs against Tampa Bay. Well, Alvin Kamara had 22.2 DraftKings points with 0 touchdowns, got there on volume, right? He achieved value on volume alone against Tampa Bay. So did Leonard Fournette last week. And the one common matching point between all those plays with these really high, like absurdly high pass game volume running backs playing against a defense that has a tough DVP, defense versus position, against running backs. Like when we look at Alvin Kamara, the public looks at this and sees this big red number here and says, I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to play these nice, pretty green numbers. And rightfully so. Matchups do matter, but matchups matter against specific running back types and their utilization. Alvin Kamara and Leonard Fournette and peak Le'Veon Bell and Christian McCaffrey are essentially a wide receiver 1 playing at running back with the amount of usage they get: 8 targets, 9 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets, and they can get there on volume on DraftKings and bring together with them a really high floor. The San Francisco 49ers have allowed more throws than anybody in the league that end up being behind the line of scrimmage, right? So they're giving up passes that are really short. They're forcing you to just kind of throw these flat passes, these wide receiver screens, because they're so tough to play against. But Alvin Kamara has caught 95% of those passes over his career. So we have an even higher floor for Alvin Kamara this week than we have in other weeks. Now, if he can break one, right? If he's shown big playability in his career, if he can bust one from outside of 15 yards, I'm not saying 50 yards or 70 yards, but he can bust one from outside of 15 yards, all of a sudden we have that ridiculously high floor that these guys have at a really low ownership percentage because of the matchup, and can exceed value at a lower ownership, just like we did last week with Fournette, just like we did in week 11 with Kamara against Tampa Bay, and just like we did with Christian McCaffrey when he was the lowest percentage owned that he's been all year when he played against San Francisco too. So the lowered price to me for Kamara is more of a boon than it is a negative. It's a long way of saying that, I guess. But Michael Thomas, I mean, we don't think both can eat. They've eaten together all season long. That's where, I mean, there's going to be 20 targets, in my opinion, between Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. I think that that's a median projection, that both of them together will have 20 targets. I don't think that I'm reaching there. Would I put Kamara and Thomas in the same lineup? In a tournament? Most definitely. In cash? Probably not. You got $100 to play on Sunday. What contest am I utilizing? Depends on what you're... There's no right answer. So like, it depends on what you're trying to do. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to grind up a bankroll really slowly? Because if you are, then you're going to play as many $1 head-to-heads and large field single entry 50-50s as possible. And maybe put some into a, put some into things, right? Put some into like tournaments, like $10 or $20 of that 100 into tournaments. But the majority of that's going to go into single entry 50-50s with as low rake as possible, and that you can get at that price point, and as many different head-to-head opponents as you can possibly get. Are you playing for entertainment purposes? Are you like when I've never gone to a movie. I got 2 kids and a wife. When we go to see a movie, I've never had a positive ROI on a movie ever. Right? It's $12, maybe $15 for each of us to get in. That's $60 down the hole. Then you're going to buy snacks in the movie theater. That's another $40. So I'm in for $100 every time I go to a movie. Never seen a positive ROI. But it's entertainment. I'm going there to be entertained. So if you're playing daily fantasy for entertainment purposes, which is a very viable and honest way to say, look, this is what I do for fun. I want to have a little bit of a sweat. Then hell, enter tournaments. But it depends on your motivation and what you want. There's no right answer. It depends on what you want to do. Tampa Bay Indy feels like it's being overlooked this week. I don't know. I mean, we talked about a bunch of players from that game already. Clearly, you're not digging through the seat cushions enough. Thoughts on Breeze at that price point? I'd rather have the parts than Breeze, but I get Breeze. You know, I'd buy into the offense. I'd buy into guys like Kamara and Thomas, and I don't think you need to buy into Breeze to get that. But for tournaments, fine. I mean, how can I explain this? I don't think quarterback on a week-to-week basis matters all that much. Now, quarterbacks from the NFL perspective is the most important position on the field, and you can win games and set your team up for multiple years if you've got good quarterbacks and all those sorts of things, you know, good quarterback play. But like realistically speaking, in fantasy, you can find good quarterback points for less money, right? You can find guys. Fitzmagic, look at his price for the last few weeks. 5K, 5,400, 5,100, 25 points, 30 points, 23 points, 21 points. That's why we always look to find cheap quarterbacks that can do stuff. Kyler Murray has the ability to put up 26, 30, 23 point games, 31 point games, and he's at 5.8K this week. Ryan Tannehill hasn't been 6K yet. 33, 19, 28, 19, 23. It's very, very difficult for a quarterback to score you 50 DraftKings points. You realize what they'd have to do to score 50 DraftKings points? So like the band of scoring at quarterback, if you go through week by week, for whatever stat service you have, go look back and see who the number 1 fantasy quarterback was and look at who the number 10 fantasy quarterback was and look at the band of scoring, the gap between number 1 and number 10 on a week. Okay. And do that every week and look at the names and then kind of think about where their prices were. Right. And then do that at running back and wide receiver. And the gap between the top wide receiver or running back and the 10th wide receiver or running back is much wider than the gap at quarterback. So that band of scoring is what makes us look for value at quarterback every week. It's also what makes me want to get maybe 4 times the amount of salary in points out of my quarterback as opposed to 3 times. So that's kind of how I think about that. Like, no love for Fournette. I mean, Fournette's essentially getting the volume of peak Le'Veon Bell. Right? I'm not saying that he is as good as peak Le'Veon Bell. So please don't get it twisted and start reeing at me in the YouTube comments. That's not what I'm saying. But this is a lot of targets, guys. He's got 81 targets on the year. That's a lot of targets. He's got 65 catches on the year. Do you realize how many catches that is? Especially with a few games left. With 4 games left and he's at 65 catches. Like, if we're going to put him at 5.5 catches a game moving forward for 4 more games, he's going to end this season with almost 90 catches. 90 catches for a guy that we thought was just a 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Maybe he busts a big play, but never really uses anything in the passing game. Doesn't really get any sort of usage there. All of a sudden, he's going to get Matt Forte type usage, Le'Veon Bell type usage. The only issue is he hasn't gotten a lot of inside the 5 carries. So we look at this 3 touchdowns, right? And he's gotten a ton of red zone usage. That's true. He's one of the top 3 or 4 players in the league in terms of red zone touches for running backs. But he's only got like 8 carries inside the 5. They haven't really worked out all that great. I think he's got 2 or 3 touchdowns on those 8 inside the 5 carries. So if all of a sudden they get inside the 5 and they start just pounding the rock with him, and last week he had one as well when Minshew took over and Minshew turned the wrong way and kind of bumped into him, and that kind of blew that play up because I believe he would have scored looking at the way the line had worked against the defensive line. If he hits that line with a head of steam, he scores a touchdown last week as well on his solo inside the 5 carry in that game. I'm assuming they're going to keep feeding Leonard Fournette the ball because it's what they've done basically all year long, right? And even in games, he's that game flow independent running back who, even in games where they're getting throttled, and they have been getting throttled the last month, right? 26-3 loss, 33-13 loss, 42-20 loss, 28-11 loss, 18 fantasy points, 36 fantasy points, 11 targets, 12 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets. This is absurd usage for a running back, and he still hasn't been priced up enough, at least to me, considering that somebody like Nick Chubb, who's seeing less volume now with the emergence of Kareem Hunt on this Cleveland Browns team, with as great a matchup as they have against Cincinnati this week. He's been seeding some snaps and seeding some usage, and definitely seeding 100% of his 3rd down and 2-minute drill usage to Kareem Hunt, and now seeded inside the 10 snap to him last week, and has seen that as well, even though they're playing them somewhat together. Nick Chubb being priced higher than Leonard Fournette is a little bit shocking to me, and maybe it's because of the matchup, but I'm not in the room at DraftKings, so I don't know. Yeah, and 6,500 for Hunt is wow, right? Because Hunt's a player that really doesn't have that high of a floor of touches, and he's priced at 6,600 this week. He saw 12 touches last week, 10 the week before, 12 the week before. Do I like any of the $6,000 to $6,900 wide receivers for cash? I mean, a lot of them are hurt. I think DeVante Parker's been really good, but this price up, especially against the Jets defense, which their defensive secondary has been not good. I'm not expecting this 38-point outburst again, but like, look at where his floor's been since Fitzmagic took over and since Preston left with an injury. All of a sudden, DeVante Parker is double-digit target guy in what, 5 of the last 7 weeks? So really good floor for him. Possible touchdown ceiling against the Jets because they give up so much. Kenny Golladay is actually a very good play this week. I know I joked around a lot on the Edge podcast, but Minnesota, you're not going to beat them by running the ball. You're just not. You kind of have to throw it. Kenny Golladay does have a good matchup this week. Did have a good game on Thanksgiving. My issue here is the volume. So he's more of a tournament boom or bust guy, not really a cash play for me. Keenan Allen is kind of fallen off the planet from a week-to-week basis. We don't know where the volume is going to be. 11 and 12 targets against Kansas City and Oakland, great, but only 6 against Denver. Yes, he got into the end zone and had a good fantasy day, but like, I don't chase touchdowns. And then only 4 targets against Green Bay. It's hard to hang my hat on Keenan Allen. He's one of my, or had been one of my favorite players on a week-to-week basis. Jarvis Landry has surpassed Odell Beckham Jr. in terms of target share. He is the #1 wide receiver, at least from a volume perspective, on the Cleveland Browns. Whether you want to argue their talent, that's up to you. It's not something that I do. Courtland Sutton has had a good breakthrough year, but again, the volume is a little bit sketchy on a week-to-week basis. Take these 2 touchdowns out, and it's 11-point day last week. So I don't know that. I think people are going to flock to Courtland Sutton because, oh, look, he had a 23-point day last week, and just ignore the fact that, again, touchdowns are extremely fickle. and don't chase them. John Brown's got a tough matchup against Baltimore. Even though it's a home game, I don't know that he's got the normal floor that he typically has, which has basically been double-digit points pretty much every week. I think that you're going up or down. And then obviously James Washington against Arizona might be one of the best plays in this range because of the matchup and how fast Arizona plays. So it's going to speed up Pittsburgh. They're going to get extra snaps, and they're going to be more efficient against Arizona because everybody plays more snaps and everybody's more efficient against Arizona. But I think that that's kind of a tournament range for me and not really a cash range. I want to pay up at wide receiver. I want to come all the way down and find value at wide receiver. And there's plenty of guys that are up and down from there that are viable to me. Soupy, yeah, rather pay down for Michael. Yeah, I'd rather pay down for anybody in the 4K range and play the guys in the 6K range. Fact, Miami defense is more expensive than the Patriots. Right, because Darnold. Give you Crowder over Boyd. Yeah, I like Crowder this week. You guys know that. Also because Chiefs. What because Chiefs? What did I miss? Oh, the Patriots defense has been priced down because of the Chiefs offense. Yeah, maybe. I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out because you have a defense that's got one of the best secondaries or the best secondary in the league, possibly, if not one of the most dominant secondaries ever. But their first half schedule was so soft and their second half schedule is so much tougher. If you just look at the names of the quarterbacks that they played in the first 8 games versus the last 8 games, that defense has had to deal with a lot better quarterback play recently, and it's looked a little bit more vulnerable than it did the first 8 weeks. Shocker that when you play against bad offensive lines and bad quarterbacks, you're going to turn them over a ton. They haven't been turning people over as much as they have before, but Gilmore being placed on Hill, I think that is going to be a bit of a drawback. We've seen Patrick Mahomes show some regression this year in terms of his red zone touchdown percentage and his overall touchdown percentage, which is something that we predicted was 100% going to happen. He's thrown 2 straight games under 200 yards in 3 of his last 4, but one of those was an injury game, so we can't really count that. But like against the Chargers and against Oakland, 2 games that they won, Patrick Mahomes had 2 touchdowns and neither game over 200 yards. So going to be just to see how they come out this week, especially with the running back situation there, which is something I can't really delve into because we don't have any clarity who's going to get the ball here on Friday. So like asking my opinion on Friday isn't going to be as useful as my opinion on Sunday morning about what's going to happen with that Kansas City backfield, whether it's going to be Darwin or anybody else. What price range am I landing at a tight end in cash? I haven't done my cash game lineup yet, so I don't know what to tell you. A lot of the ways that I've been playing around with stuff to this point, probably in that 4 to 5K range, but I think that that's when there was not as much access to value on this slate. The more value that opens up, and Ian Thomas possibly just opened up at 2,500 where he was not opened up to us before with Greg Olsen out. We have 2 possible running back mega values with Powell and with Madison, depending on if they're starting running backs, whether that's going to be Dalvin Cook or Le'Veon Bell, who are possibly missing this week's game. If they do, that creates a massive value at running back. Then we can possibly spend up a little bit more at wide receiver. Then we can spend up a little bit more at tight end. So I don't know what the optimal lineup build is going to be yet because we don't have all of the information yet. So right now, everything is an if-then statement for me. You're between Henry, Doyle, and Thomas. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was alluding to, right? Like that 4K to 5K range. I know that Henry's 5,100. And Thomas is super duper cheap. Like if you want to punt tight end, I am not against Thomas punting tight end. Because we talked about this last week too. Like if you're playing a tight end for 2,500, what point are you not going to be happy with? Because it's not about just that tight end. Because there's going to be people that tell you you have to get 20 points from your tight end to win a tournament. And you don't. Really don't. You don't. You can, but it's more about having access to those other guys because the tight end's rarely going to have 30 to 40 fantasy points. We've seen that from Ertz. We've seen that from Kelsey a few times, but we haven't seen it this year, right? So 15 to 20 points out of your tight end is awesome. But if you get 12 points, if you get 9 points from a 2.5K tight end, and that gives you access to a running back or two running backs now that are going to get you 30 fantasy points. That's way more important to me. And those are your paths. Basically, if you're going to win a GPP, you're going to have 225 to 250 points anyway. You don't have to get all of them from your tight end. You have to get them from the guys that you spend money on. You need to have the guys that have the blow up game. You need to have that 40-point outburst from DeVante Parker. You need to have that 45-point outburst from Christian McCaffrey on the weeks that he had it in order to win. You need to have those big weeks when you played Derrick Henry when he was a value. So those are the guys that you have to find. The high dollar wide receivers aren't too appealing. No, they're not this week, but that doesn't mean that they can't win you a GPP. And it doesn't mean that you have to play all of them either, right? One value running back can open up two other running backs for you, right? So like early in the week at running back, it was hard to get to Christian McCaffrey. Dalvin Cook was somebody that I was centered around. Now I don't know if I'm going to be centered around him. Derrick Henry was maybe yes, maybe no. Leonard Fournette was interesting because of his volume. Le'Veon Bell because of the matchup. Alvin Kamara because of the price and his usage. Aaron Jones, we've spoken ad nauseum about him, but we were going to probably land in this range and probably do something like this and something like this to start, right? And I understand people getting a little bit of a nervous stomach about Kamara there, but Melvin Gordon against Jacksonville, who's allowed 200 yards rushing in 4 different games this year, and Melvin Gordon sitting between 20 and 25 touches 3 of the last 4 weeks, and against Kansas City, still saw 17, gives you a really high floor for 5,400. Now, if you're telling me I can plug in, and that third running back that you're usually going to want to plug in was going to be somebody that was a little bit tough, right? Was a little bit tough to get to, or was somebody like Devontae Freeman in a good matchup against Carolina, and a lot of people aren't very happy about playing Devonta Freeman. All of a sudden, if you're telling me we've got a Madison or we've got a Powell who are going to step into a massive role in a very good matchup, now all of a sudden you can upgrade something that you couldn't upgrade before. And you don't have to just play all the value running backs. You can say, okay, I'm going to play this value running back, but I'm going to lock in a floor of touches with a little bit higher price running back and differentiate myself here or there. Just leave 4K on the table. I'm never leaving 4K on the table in a main slate. I know you're joking, Money Mike. So if they're all healthy and a go, say we go CMC, mega value running back. Who's your next favorite running back in cash? Melvin Gordon. Comfortable playing MG3 and Lenny from the same game? I think it's a similar situation to the Henry Fournette game from before, where they're both going to get volume, and volume is king, right? So like the only bad scenario in that game is if the Jags get out to like a 17 or a 20-point lead, right? That would be a bad game flow for MG3, but I don't see that happening very often. Like there is a percent, if you look at the bell curve of possible outcomes, there are certain outcomes where that could be the case, but I think they're somewhat minimal. So if you do want to play MG3 and Lenny in the same lineup, I'm not as against that as I was, just like I was with the Henry and Leonard Fournette play from before. Fournette, I don't care. If you think Fournette's team's going to be playing from behind, he's great. If he's going to be playing from ahead, it's great too, because he's going to get 25 touches. If they're playing from ahead, he's going to get maybe 17 to 20 touches if they're behind, but he's going to get more touches in the pass game if they're behind. So either way, it's fine for Fournette. The struggle is, and that game in Tennessee worked out perfectly, right? Because like Tennessee got way up, and then Fournette was the guy that was chasing from behind, and he scored touchdowns, and Henry was doing his thing. If you think San Diego, if you think Los Angeles is going to win that game, if you think the Chargers are going to win that game, then all of a sudden you're going to get your 20 to 25 touches out of MG3. You're also going to get more passing usage out of Leonard Fournette, and I think you're fine there. You think Duke Johnson has good potential this week? I never play Duke Johnson. And like, if it happens on like a showdown slate like it did last time, then it's not going to burn me. But like, what are we paying for? And it's like, okay, it's 3,900, so you're not paying all that much, right? But you're putting in a guy that could realistically have 4 to 6 fantasy points. Like, very realistically, could have 4 to 6. He does not have the same role in the passing game as somebody like James White. He doesn't, right? 6 targets, 1, 2, 5, 3 straight weeks, 1, 3. It bounces all over the place with him. So as opposed to somebody like James White, who's like 7, 8, 8, 8, 7, 12, 9, right? So while his pass game usage or his ability in the pass game is great, his usage is definitely not consistent. Any sub K wide receivers, 4K wide receivers on my radar? Not really yet. Maybe Paris Campbell, but that's about it. I don't know that you need to dip down to that range very much. Eric Ebron's on IR. He's not playing, so he's not on the slate. He is not playing anymore this year. He's in Bora Bora sunning himself, as I would like to be. Crowder or Parker in cash? Crowder's much cheaper. I'd prefer Crowder. 5,300 for Crowder and maybe 7 to 10 targets this week against a defense that can't stop anybody. If you think that Darnold is going to have a good game, right? Any game that Sam Darnold has had a good game, Jamison Crowder has had a very good game. So if you think it's a week where Darnold has a good week, then Crowder goes along with that. Certain wide receivers are tied to their quarterbacks. I believe that Crowder is a quarterback or a wide receiver who is very, very easily tied to his quarterback. If you think that Darnold is going to have a good week against Miami, and pretty much everybody has a good week against Miami, then Crowder becomes a very good play. Robbie, a good pivot? Is he dust? Sure, he's a good pivot. But I don't think he's as solid a floor of play with a similar ceiling to somebody like Jamison Crowder. Freeman, Drake, Laird to pay for wide receiver? Yeah, you can. But you'd have to hope for other... I mean, in tournaments, I think that's fine. As a tournament lineup, W. Keecher, I think that's a good lineup, right? Where you're going to differentiate. You're not going to pay up there, and then maybe you pay up at tight end and at wide receiver, or maybe even at quarterback to differentiate lineups with a completely different path. Laird is sketchy, right? Laird could have a 5-point game or he could have a 15-point game, and don't expect a touchdown. So if you're playing a player like a Laird, you have to be okay with them getting to the points that you need on volume alone. So if you think he can get there on pass game volume, he's not going to be efficient in the run game. That's not what he does. But if you think he's going to get 5 or 6 catches for 40 or 50 yards, then I get it. But you got to find the ceiling, and I don't know if there's a ceiling there. Trying your hand at 3 max this week? Good luck. Laird, have mercy on your soul if you play him. Fair. And I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you guys for tuning in again this week. Best of luck this weekend. If you'd be so kind, drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. Ring that notifications bell. And I'll see you on Sunday morning on twitch.tv. Link down below in the description for the Anti-Tinkercast. 45 minutes right before kickoff. Till that next week of videos, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.
He's a legend.